Minma, Mito, and Naruto were born as triplets to the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and Kushina Uzumaki. During the Nine-Tails attack on the village, the beast was split, half sealed in Minma, the other half in Mito, marking them as heroes from birth. Naruto, however, received nothing. While Minma grew up as an average child and Mito was praised for her budding talent, Naruto was something far greater, a prodigy of prodigies, mastering skills no child his age should have been able to. Yet despite his brilliance, his parents never acknowledged him. Their love, pride, and attention were reserved for Minma and Mito. Naruto was left in the shadows, neglected by his family, scorned by the village, and forced to walk a lonely path that none of them ever noticed. Now 5 years old, the triplets, Naruto, Minma, and Mito, had already begun their training as shinobi. One morning, Minato called Naruto aside, his voice firm. "Teach Minma," he ordered. "Help him catch up." Naruto, as always, obeyed without complaint. All right. During their training, Minma grew frustrated. Despite using the same techniques, he couldn't keep up with Naruto's natural skill. "You're hiding something," Minma snapped. "Give me the secret scrolls you're using." Naruto blinked, confused. "I don't have any secret scrolls. I just train with the same ones everyone else uses." Minma's eyes narrowed. "Liar. I've seen you train alone. You have something hidden. Give it to me." Naruto shook his head, calm but firm. "I really don't. If I had something special, I'd give it to you. I promise." Minma's frustration turned to resentment. A thought crossed his mind, a wicked, petty plan. "Fine," Minma muttered under his breath. "Let's see what happens now." Without warning, he clenched his fist and punched himself on his face, hard enough to leave a small bruise. A moment later, he began to wail. "Dad!" Minato appeared in a flash, alarmed. "Minma, what happened?" Minma clutched his bruised cheek, tears streaming down his face. "It was Naruto. He hit me." Naruto's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? No, I didn't. I swear." But before he could finish, Minato slapped him across the face. "Enough with the lies." Minato snapped, glaring at him. Naruto stood frozen, too stunned to speak. The sting on his cheek was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. Behind Minato's back, Minma smirked. And from that day forward, he used the same trick again and again, hurting himself, crying out, and blaming Naruto. Each time, Naruto was punished. And each time, no one questioned Minma's word. Naruto's home was never truly home. By the time the triplets turned 7, the difference in how they were treated had become undeniable. Their mother, Kushina, would cheerfully ask Minma and Mito every day, "What do you two want for dinner? Ramen? Curry? I'll make whatever you like." But she never once asked Naruto. Not even once. If he sat at the table, no one noticed. If he spoke, no one listened. If he was hurt, no one cared. To them, Naruto wasn't even a part of the family anymore. He was a shadow, a ghost. In the village, they were even worse. Rumors had spread, false whispers that Naruto was the true demon, that he had corrupted chakra, that he was dangerous. The people hated him for reasons even they couldn't explain. One rainy evening, Naruto was walking home alone when a group of villagers cornered him in an alley. They surrounded him with cruel smiles, hate in their eyes. "He's not human," one spat. "Why would the Hokage even keep a thing like you?" said another. They beat him, kicked him, cursed him, dragged his body through the mud. And then, a man, dressed in dark robes and reeking of alcohol, crouched beside him with something in his hand. It was a rotting human finger. "You're a demon, right?" he sneered. "Demons feed on humans, so go ahead." He shoved the finger into Naruto's mouth, forcing it down as Naruto choked and gagged. "Eat it. Show us what you really are." Tears mixed with blood on Naruto's face. His body trembled, his heart pounding with pain and confusion and rage. No one came to help. No parent, no the rain, and silence. Unbeknownst to the villagers, the finger they forced into Naruto's mouth was no ordinary human remains. It was not rotting flesh from the dead, it was something far more terrifying. It was a fragment of the indestructible, a cursed relic that had withstood time itself. It was the finger of Ryaman Sukuna, the king of curses. A being once feared by all. A being whose name shattered nations and brought sorcerers to their knees. To the weak, Sukuna was a monster. To the strong, he was a god. In the age when he walked the earth, Sukuna slaughtered entire armies and toyed with death as though it were a game. His mastery over cursed energy was unparalleled, his intelligence inhuman. A true prodigy, one born of chaos, cruelty, and absolute domination. And now, that power slumbered inside a broken boy. A prodigy of prodigies, abandoned by family, hated by the village, and pushed to the edge of despair. As Naruto lay in the mud, coughing, bleeding, and trembling from the pain, something inside him shifted. The cursed energy in Sukuna's finger recognized him, not as a host to consume, but as a kindred soul. A prodigy just like him. And so, from the deepest pit of cursed power, Sukuna stirred. So this is the body I've been fed into. The voice echoed in the void of Naruto's mind, deep, cold, amused. How ironic. Naruto's eyes widened. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from something else. Something dark, something ancient, something powerful. In that moment, the king of curses met the child forgotten by gods and men alike. And it was only the beginning. Sukuna had awoken, but he was far from the godlike being he once was. His cursed energy was depleted, a mere fragment of his true self. So, for now, he remained quiet. He watched. He listened. He observed the boy who unknowingly became his vessel. From the moment he stirred inside Naruto, Sukuna felt it. A spark. No, a flame. Raw, wild, untamed power. The boy wasn't just gifted. He was a prodigy, the kind that appeared once in a millennium. And what did Sukuna see? A child who trained alone in the dark. A child who smiled through pain, who bore his suffering in silence. A child beaten by villagers, slapped by his own father, and ignored by a mother who never once asked him what he liked to eat. 3 years passed. Sukuna said nothing. But he saw everything. He saw how Minato, a man once known as a genius himself, believed every lie Minma told, never once questioning why the bruises only ever appeared when Naruto was around. He watched as Naruto was slapped, humiliated, silenced, day after day. And then there was Minma. Sukuna examined him, watched him, measured him. And what did he find? Trash. Not because Minma lacked talent. Sukuna never hated the untalented as he saw in his days those with no talent faced him toe-to-toe. He hated those who refused to become strong when they had resources. If Minma had trained, if he had clawed his way up from weakness, Sukuna might have respected him, might have tolerated him. But instead, he saw a lazy brat, spoiled by praise and drunk on undeserved affection. Pampered, arrogant, empty. He has nothing, Sukuna thought, and yet they give him everything. It was enough to sicken even a demon. But Naruto had everything Sukuna once did. The genius, the loneliness, the fury. And now, the king of curses was inside a boy who would one day make the world kneel. Not by fate. Not by privilege. But by power. What Sukuna couldn't understand, at first, was this. Naruto was human. Not a cursed spirit. Not a reincarnated monster. Just a boy. And yet, he was treated as something less than dirt. Sukuna, who had lived for over 1,000 years, who had seen kings and beggars, gods and demons. He was a master at reading people, emotions, lies, true intent. He had seen hatred in many forms, fear, envy, disgust. But what Naruto endured was different. His parents never spoke their hatred aloud. They never said the words. But Sukuna saw it, in every glance, in every choice, in every silence. Minato, the great fourth Hokage, looked at Minma, who held half of the 9 tails, and saw a legacy. A boy to be proud of. A symbol. And when he looked at Naruto, nothing. No pride. No care. Only the burden of a child he couldn't understand, and perhaps, somewhere deep down, resented. Then there was Kushina, the mother. She didn't beat him. She didn't yell. But she did something worse. She turned her back like nothing happened. Day after day, she asked Minma and Mito what they wanted for lunch, what they wanted to wear, how their training was going. But never once did she ask Naruto. As if he wasn't even there. As if he didn't exist. And through it all, Sukuna watched. The only one who didn't treat Naruto like a ghost was Mito, his sister. She didn't hate him. She didn't lie about him. She even greeted him when they crossed paths in the halls. But it wasn't love. It wasn't sibling warmth. It was the same kind of distant care that a kind orphanage matron shows a child under her charge. Compassion without closeness, kindness without connection. And that, in a way, hurt Naruto more than hate ever could. Sukuna, the king of curses, was baffled, not by the hatred, not by the injustice, but by the reasonless nature of it all. There was no curse on Naruto, no secret monster. He was a normal child, born alongside two siblings. And yet he was treated as if he shouldn't have been born at all. Fools, Sukuna thought bitterly. They've chosen to mock the storm before it has even begun to thunder. When the triplets joined the Ninja Academy, the entire village celebrated Minma and Mito as heroes. They were praised for containing the Nine Tails, hailed as the protectors of the village. Everywhere they went, people smiled, bowed, and offered gifts or praise. Naruto, however, was treated like an outcast. While his siblings were admired, he was hated, scorned, and whispered about as if he were a threat rather than a child. At the academy, Minma quickly became popular, especially with the girls. He was constantly surrounded by fangirls who adored him, and he soaked in the attention, indulging in their praise like a child in a candy store. At the academy, Naruto's talent didn't go unnoticed. He was a prodigy, his scores were always at the top, and his abilities surpassed most of his peers. Yet, for some strange reason, his grades never reflected his true potential. Every report card showed Naruto barely passing, despite his obvious skill and dedication. Confused and frustrated, he approached his teachers, asking why his marks were so low. They couldn't offer any explanation, and their unease only deepened his suspicions. It wasn't until later, when he discovered the truth, that everything became clear. Naruto found that his father had swapped his grades with Minma's. Minma, who had barely passed, now had the marks of someone who had excelled. The shock hit him like a punch to the gut. For years, Naruto had believed that his parents favored his siblings because of the nine tails sealed within them. He thought that maybe Minma needed extra support due to his lack of talent, and Mito's talent only made sense in their eyes. He'd accepted that, convinced it was the reason they didn't acknowledge his achievements. He had thought that he, too, could earn their love if he worked hard enough. But now, with the discovery of the grade swap, everything changed. Naruto finally understood the painful truth. His parents never truly loved him. They hadn't favored Minma and Mito out of necessity or love. They had simply chosen to ignore him. And for the first time, Naruto realized that he could no longer hope for something that had never been there. The love he'd wished for, the recognition he craved, was never going to come. It was time to let go of the fantasy. Naruto was consumed by anger. The betrayal he felt when he discovered that his father had swapped his grades with Minma's was too much to bear. Furious at the injustice, Naruto made a decision. He would deliberately fail. If his father didn't value his true abilities, then he wouldn't bother to show them anymore. He passed only by the barest of margins, just enough to scrape through. When Minato saw Naruto's grades, he slapped him, furious that his son had failed to meet expectations. His anger was palpable, but Naruto felt nothing. No shame, no remorse, only resentment. Meanwhile, Minma failed several subjects, despite his fanfare and the praise he continued to receive. But that didn't matter. His failure was never met with anger or punishment. Naruto's mother remained silent, as always. She didn't defend him, didn't say a word about the unfairness of it all. Her indifference cut deeper than any slap. In that silence, Naruto's resentment grew, a burning rage that threatened to consume him. He couldn't understand why his family treated him this way, and he began to realize they never truly cared. As Naruto's heart filled with anger, frustration, and hatred, Sukuna observed from within. For the past 3 years, Sukuna had been silently gathering cursed energy from Naruto's pain and suffering. The negativity, the resentment, the hatred that had built up within the boy, it was exactly what Sukuna needed. And now, with the newborn resentment rising in Naruto's heart, Sukuna felt the power surge. The energy was becoming palpable, swirling around Naruto like a storm ready to erupt. Sukuna saw his opportunity. The prodigy he had been waiting for was ready. At the academy, while Minma basked in the adoration of his classmates for his high grades, Naruto was left to silently endure the unfair treatment. The praise for Minma grew louder each day, but there was one person who saw through the facade, Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke, ever the perceptive observer, noticed something that others didn't. He could see the true potential in Naruto. He recognized the raw talent that Naruto possessed. In fact, Sasuke began to believe that Naruto was more of a prodigy than even his older brother, Itachi. Yet, despite Naruto's obvious skill, his grades remained low, and Sasuke couldn't understand why. One day, while Sasuke was observing Naruto, he saw the boy filled with hatred and anger, directed squarely at Minma. The fury in Naruto's eyes was unmistakable, and Sasuke could sense the deep frustration simmering beneath the surface. Sasuke, unsure whether he should intervene, hesitated. His Uchiha pride prevented him from reaching out. It was a strange feeling, seeing someone so talented, yet so angry, and knowing that his pride held him back from understanding Naruto's pain. As the days passed, Naruto continued to barely pass, deliberately so. He refused to budge to the demands of his ex, father, Minato, or anyone else who tried to pressure him into achieving more. Naruto wasn't interested in meeting anyone's expectations anymore. He had made up his mind. If his family didn't care, then neither would he. Naruto was sleeping peacefully, his breath steady, his body finally at rest after another exhausting day at the academy. But suddenly, the calm darkness of sleep shifted, twisted, until he found himself standing in an eerie, unfamiliar space. It was quiet, dim, and filled with an overwhelming sense of power. A voice echoed through the stillness. "Well, I finally get to meet the prodigy of prodigies," the voice said, amused and deep with an ancient resonance. Naruto spun around, eyes sharp. "Who are you?" he asked, immediately on guard, taking a fighting stance. The man in front of him chuckled, eyes gleaming like blood-soaked rubies. "Don't fret, brat. I'm not here to fight. Not yet. I came to talk." Naruto narrowed his eyes. "Then talk. I don't have time for games." The stranger grinned. "Fiery one, aren't you? I like that. Very well. I've seen how you've been treated. How your so-called father swapped your grades. How the villagers beat you, hate you for nothing. I've watched for years." Naruto stiffened. "So what do you want from me?" he asked bluntly. The man tilted his head, still smiling. "Let's just say, we're the same, you and I." Naruto frowned. "What do you mean?" The man's voice grew heavier, darker. "I was once the strongest of my era, a prodigy among prodigies. For centuries, no one could match me. The weak feared me as a monster. The strong revered me as a god. And yet, despite all that, I was hated, feared. Even my parents turned their backs on me. All because I was born from a cursed spirit." He stepped closer, his aura pressing in around Naruto like a storm. "And you," he continued, voice quiet but filled with steel. "A human boy, born innocent, gifted, unmatched, but hated, shunned, and ignored by your own family. Especially that father of yours. A fool blinded by favoritism." Naruto said nothing, his fists clenched. For once, someone didn't lie to him. Someone understood. Naruto stood firm, his eyes locked on the man before him, a presence both ancient and terrifying. "What do you want?" Naruto asked, voice low but steady. Sukuna smiled, the kind of smile that held centuries of blood, pain, and pride. "Let's join hands, Naruto. Together, we'll reshape this world." Naruto narrowed his eyes. "Reshape it how?" "We conquer it," Sukuna said without hesitation. "We crush those who dared look down on us. We make them crawl. The weak will serve, and the strong will reign. No more lies. No more masks. Naruto's expression turned colder. I'm not interested. Sukuna's eyes darkened slightly. Why not? Look around you. The village treats you like a disease. Your own father erased your achievements. Your mother pretends you don't exist. And your siblings? He chuckled. They bask in the light you were denied. Naruto clenched his fists but didn't break eye contact. I know all that. Then take my power, Sukuna urged. Become the strongest. Make them pay. Naruto shook his head. I don't want to rule over anyone. And I don't want to become like them. Or like you. That made Sukuna pause. Even with all that power, Naruto continued, you were still alone, weren't you? All that strength, and no one to share it with. That's not power. That's a cage. Sukuna's smirk faded for the first time in centuries. You're more interesting than I thought, he muttered. Naruto looked Sukuna in the eye, his expression unreadable. I'd rather be content with even on person who loves me for who I am rather than for my power and live alone all the days of my life, he said calmly. You say you're the strongest, but even with all that power, you were still lonely, weren't you? Sukuna didn't respond right away. Then, he let out a dry, mirthless chuckle. You're right. I once met a boy, normal, untalented, nothing special. But he worked harder than anyone. And one day, he defeated me. Not with strength, but with heart. He showed me what it means to be human, what it means to love. Naruto's eyes widened for a moment, but he quickly masked his surprise. Sukuna stepped closer, his voice colder. If you had agreed to my offer when I first woke up, I would have killed you without hesitation. The silence that followed was heavy, but Naruto broke it. Then why ask me now? Sukuna's gaze flickered, because you're like me. But not entirely. Naruto sighed, his tone steady. The village? Yeah, they've treated me like dirt. My parents? They chose to ignore me. But there are a few people, just a few, who've treated me like a real person. And besides, he looked up. Konoha isn't the whole world. I believe there are places out there where people aren't like this, where they won't hate me just for existing. Sukuna raised an eyebrow. You're still holding on to hope. Not hope, curiosity, Naruto said. Before I destroy anything, I want to see what else this world has to offer. After silence, I want to create a world where everyone is treated equally, fairly, Sukuna said, his voice steady, but not cold. Naruto narrowed his eyes. That's not what you said before. You talked about conquest, enslaving the weak. Sukuna gave a dry chuckle. Yes, that was my first instinct. It always has been. When you're hated your whole life, hunted, shunned, spat on, it's easy to see domination as the only way to be acknowledged. But he paused. For a moment, he looked less like the king of curses and more like a man who had seen too much. Even when I was at the height of my power, I was alone, Sukuna said quietly. No matter how many bowed before me, no one stood beside me. Naruto said nothing, but his fists clenched slightly. At the end, when I was dying, I realized something. Sukuna's gaze didn't waver. Power means nothing if there's no one to share it with. In that last moment, I decided if I ever got another chance, I'd try to understand. Not just strength, but love, connection, maybe even redemption. Naruto looked at him, surprised. Not because Sukuna admitted it, but because he understood it. That loneliness, that ache of being surrounded by people, yet unseen. You felt it too, haven't you? Sukuna asked. Naruto nodded slowly. The village, my so-called family, the way they treat me. Yeah, I felt it. And yet, Sukuna said, stepping closer, you refused to destroy them, even when I offered you the power to make the world kneel. Naruto smiled faintly, not out of joy, but quiet defiance. I'd rather live with a little dignity than rule in loneliness, he said. You might be strong, Sukuna, stronger than anyone, but in the end, you were alone. That's not strength. That's tragedy. Sukuna was silent for a moment. Then, with a voice tinged not with malice, but something that almost sounded like respect, he murmured, maybe you're the one I've been waiting for. Naruto stood in the dimly lit void, still trying to make sense of Sukuna's offer. So what now? Naruto asked cautiously. Sukuna folded his arms. We train. Naruto blinked. What? You need to become strong, Sukuna repeated. Then we can formulate a plan. But you said you'd give me power, Naruto reminded him, brows furrowed. I did, Sukuna replied, his tone sharper now. But I don't want you to rely on me completely. You have potential, real potential, but I won't hand everything to you. Strength must be earned. Naruto hesitated, then gave a small nod. All right. And with that, the dream, or whatever it was, faded into black. He shot upright in bed, heart pounding. Morning sunlight filtered through the window. Was it a dream? It's not a dream, brat. Naruto's eyes widened. What? We met. It happened. It's all real, said the voice inside his head, deep, confident, laced with a hint of amusement. Naruto scrambled to calm himself. How are we talking? Who are you? And how the hell are you inside my head? My name is Sukuna. Ryaman Sukuna, the voice answered. And I've been inside you since 3 years ago. 3 years ago? Naruto muttered. Then a memory hit him. The time an old, shady villager made him eat when he was beaten. Naruto gagged at the thought. You mean that gross, dried-up finger? That gross finger was a fragment of my soul, Sukuna said with a grin in his tone. That's how I'm here. Naruto fell silent, deep in thought. Can you train me? Why? You said you're the strongest, right? Naruto replied, his voice steady. There was a pause, then Sukuna chuckled. Fine, I'll train you. But understand something. I won't teach you anything related to chakra or jutsu. Why not? Because I don't use chakra, Sukuna replied. I use something far older. Cursed energy. It's born from negative emotions. Fear, anger, hatred, pain. It's what fuels me. Naruto clenched his fists. That sounds like something I have a lot of. Exactly. Naruto looked out the window, the village slowly coming to life under the morning sun. His path was no longer the same. He wasn't just the boy the village ignored anymore. He was the vessel of a king. And now, the real training would begin. From that day forward, Naruto trained in secret. It took weeks, months, before he could even grasp the feel of cursed energy. Unlike chakra, it resisted his control, like a wild beast snarling at the leash. But once he understood it, even a little, the growth came fast. Faster than even Sukuna expected. The day of graduation finally arrived. Naruto stood in line among the other academy students, hands in his pockets, face unreadable. The teams were announced one by one. Naruto waited, not out of excitement, but with simmering tension. And finally, Team 12, Iruka called out. Naruto Uzumaki, Minma Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki. A murmur rippled through the room. Mito lit up with joy. Yes, she whispered excitedly, turning to Minma and Naruto. We're together. Minma gave a lazy smirk, barely processing the announcement. He didn't really care who he was teamed with. As long as he could show off, it didn't matter. Naruto didn't speak. He didn't look at either of them. He clenched his fists. Of course, he thought bitterly. Of course they'd put us together. Can't even let me breathe. And your Jonin-sensei, Iruka continued, will be Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto's blood boiled. His eyes narrowed. Mito gasped in joy. Mama's going to be our teacher too. That's amazing. Minma looked mildly surprised, then shrugged. Naruto's knuckles whitened. Later, at the training grounds, Kushina stood before the three. The wind blew softly through the trees, the perfect day for training, for most. All right, Kushina smiled warmly. Minma, Mito, come with me. We'll begin training. Naruto stood without moving, but Kushina didn't even look his way. Come on, Mito beamed, running off with her mother and brother. Naruto stood frozen for a second. Then he turned as a word, he walked away. He returned to the woods, the place where he always trained. Alone, quiet, unnoticed. He raised his hand. Faint black-red tendrils of cursed energy crackled around his fingers like living flame. He smirked bitterly. Fine, he muttered. I'll train myself. For the past month, Team 12 had done nothing but D-rank chores, rescuing cats, pulling weeds, chasing chickens. Minma and Mito were growing frustrated, constantly whining to Kushina. This is stupid, Minma complained one evening, kicking a stone down the road. We're Uzumakis. We should be doing something real. Mito nodded, crossing her arms. We've been ready since the academy. When are we getting an actual mission? Naruto remained silent, standing a little apart from them as always. Kushina sighed. Fine, let's speak to the Hokage. At the Hokage Tower, they entered the office to find Team 7 already present. Kakashi leaning lazily against a wall, Sasuke with arms crossed, Sakura bright-eyed, and Mina looking uninterested. Perfect timing, said Minato, Hokage's robe fluttering. You'll all be assigned a joint mission. Both teams. Mito blinked. A joint mission? You're to escort a man named Tazuna to the Land of Waves and protect him while he completes construction of a bridge. It's officially C rank. Naruto narrowed his eyes. A bridge builder? This isn't going to be simple. The two teams traveled together, Kushina and Kakashi leading the way. Naruto stayed near the rear, quiet as usual. The atmosphere was light. Mito and Sakura talked. Minma and Mina argued. Sasuke occasionally made comments. Then, Naruto's gaze locked onto something. A puddle? He thought, slowing slightly. It hasn't rained in days. His eyes sharpened. Just then, clang. Chains erupted from the puddle, wrapping around both Kushina and Kakashi. The two jonin were pulled in with a sickening jerk and collapsed to the ground, seemingly out cold. Everyone froze. The two demon brothers emerged, their grotesque claws glinting. Mito screamed. Sakura stumbled back. One of the brothers rushed toward Tazuna with a snarl. The other turned toward Naruto, licking his blade. You're just a runt. SHHHK. A sudden slash cut through the air. The demon brother froze mid-step, eyes wide. His body slowly split in two, vertically, from head to groin. A clean, perfect slice. He collapsed in gruesome halves, steam hissing from the cut. Everyone stared in horror. Naruto stood motionless, his eyes dark and cold. His hand hadn't even moved. What was that? Sakura gasped. Even Kakashi, who was behind the bushes observing, looked stunned. How could he do that? I have never heard a jutsu like that. The remaining demon brother howled in rage and charged Naruto blindly. Without blinking, Naruto murmured, cleave and dismantle. SHNK. Another invisible slash. Another death. Blood misted the air. Silence fell. Even Sasuke, usually so composed, took an unconscious step back. That technique, what it is? Kushina slowly got to her feet, staring at Naruto like she was seeing a stranger. Kakashi turned to Tazuna with a solemn expression. Tell us the truth. Who are you really running from? Tazuna hesitated for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he finally spoke. It's Gato. He's the one behind the threats. He wants me dead before I finish the bridge. If he succeed, the Land of Waves will crumble. Please, you have to help me. Kushina crossed her arms, her expression hardening. We can't afford to put our team in danger. You've seen how inexperienced they are. They're not ready for this kind of mission. Tazuna's eyes widened with panic, his voice shaking as he stepped forward. I'm telling you the truth. Without your help, we won't make it. You'll leave us all to die. Kakashi gave Tazuna a sympathetic look, but his words were firm. We can't risk our young shinobi's lives. This is too much for them. Tazuna's desperation grew as he dropped to his knees. Please, the villagers, the people of Wave, they're all depending on me. I can't fail them. I'll die if you leave me now. The rest of the team started to turn back toward the village, but Naruto stood there, silent, his eyes distant and unreadable. Kushina called out to him, a faint trace of concern in her voice. Naruto, come on. We're heading back. But Naruto didn't budge. His gaze remained fixed ahead, a flicker of determination crossing his features. I'll go with him. The words hung in the air, causing everyone to freeze in shock. Kushina glared at Naruto. Naruto, you can't do this. You shouldn't go without your team. Naruto raised an eyebrow, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Really? We've been Genins for a month. Have you even bothered to train me or notice me in the team? Don't preach about teamwork like a saint. It honestly sickens me to hear it from you." The group fell silent, shocked by his words. Kushina stood there, unable to believe what he had just said. Minma seized the opportunity to mock. "Of course, who would bother training a loser like you?" Naruto's glare sharpened, but then his expression shifted to a mocking one. "Oh, tell me, who ran off to hide behind the bushes while the rest of us protected Tazuna? And who killed the demon brothers without even lifting a finger? It's obvious, isn't it? You ran like a coward, and I killed the demon brothers without even moving. So, tell me, who's the real loser here?" Minma had no response. Without another word, Naruto turned and walked alongside Tazuna. While Naruto walked alongside Tazuna, the others stood in silence, contemplating their next move. Sasuke broke the silence, turning to Kakashi. "I think we should continue the mission. If we keep hiding behind the excuse that we're not ready, we'll never be ready when it truly matters." Kakashi glanced at Kushina, his expression unreadable. Mito, unable to hold back, spoke up, her disappointment evident. "Mom, Sasuke's right, and I'm disappointed in you. For an entire month, you never bothered to call Naruto to train." With Mito and Sasuke leading the way, the others reluctantly followed. As they continued walking, they suddenly encountered Zabuza, the notorious rogue ninja. Kakashi and Kushina immediately stepped forward, preparing to fight him. The others, though tense, stood back, observing the battle. Naruto, however, wasn't just watching. He was carefully gauging Zabuza's strength, analyzing every move, his mind calculating the most efficient way to handle such a threat. Just as it seemed Zabuza would land a fatal blow on Kakashi, a sudden dart pierced Zabuza's back. A masked figure appeared from the shadows, swiftly grabbing the wounded rogue ninja and disappearing with him in the blink of an eye. The group stood stunned for a moment, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. Kakashi and Kushina took a moment to compose themselves, then led the team to Tazuna's house. Inside, they were greeted by Tazuna's daughter, Tsunami, who offered them hospitality and a chance to rest after the tense encounter. While they were eating dinner, the atmosphere was tense. Inari, Tsunami's son, suddenly yelled out, his voice filled with frustration. "You don't know what it means to suffer." Naruto's eyes hardened, the anger bubbling up from within him. He slammed his hand on the table, his voice sharp and cutting as he snapped back. "Shut up, brat. You think you're the only one in the world who's suffering? Wake up." Inari, taken aback by the outburst, remained silent for a moment, but Naruto wasn't finished. He pointed towards Kushina, his voice laced with bitterness. "See that woman? My so-called pathetic mother. She never cared about me, never noticed me. She neglected me, and now look at her with her perfect little family." He then pointed at Minma, his expression cold. "And that pathetic boy, who looks like me, my so-called brother. All he does is bark, but there's no bite. He doesn't work hard, a lazy sloth who thinks even lifting a finger is a burden, expects everything to be handed to him on a silver platter." Naruto's eyes darkened further as he continued, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "And my so-called pathetic excuse of a Hokage? Mentioning him wanted to puke out. I don't even know why, but he hates me with a passion. That fool swapped my grades with fool, so this idiot would get all the attention. When I found out what happened, I barely passed all the exams just to keep the peace. And the villagers, they're worse than all of them combined. They call me a monster, a freak. I'm just a punching bag for their frustration." The room was silent, all eyes on Naruto, who now stood there, chest heaving with the weight of his words. Tsunami, seeing the pain in his eyes, could only look on with a mixture of sympathy and understanding. Inari, though, seemed to realize the weight of Naruto's words for the first time. He couldn't speak, the anger and frustration in Naruto's voice making him question his own outlook on life. Everyone around the table was stunned into silence. Kakashi, who had always seen his sensei's family as an ideal, couldn't believe what he was hearing. Sasuke, too, was shocked. He had always wondered why Naruto had so much disdain for his brother, Minma, but now it all made sense. The weight of Naruto's words hung heavily in the air, and it was clear that none of them had fully understood the depth of his pain until now. Kushina sat there, frozen, as guilt began to wash over her in waves. She had never thought she would hear such words from her son, and now, faced with the truth, she didn't know how to respond. Kakashi, breaking the silence, finally spoke. Is it true, Kushina-san? His voice was softer than usual, tinged with the same disbelief he felt. Kushina remained silent, her gaze dropping to the table, unable to look anyone in the eye. Mito, unable to hold back her anger any longer, spoke up. Mom, tell me why you both treated Naruto like nothing. You believed Minma's lies and punished Naruto for things he didn't do. Kushina was still at a loss for words, but Mito didn't stop. Remember every time Dad hit Naruto for beating Minma? That wasn't the truth. In reality, it was this fool, she pointed at Minma, who's too lazy to work hard, who thought Naruto used some hidden scrolls and blamed Naruto for everything. And Dad believed it all and punished Naruto for nothing. And you, Mito's voice wavered, but she kept her gaze fixed on Kushina. You never even bothered to get to know him. You just stood by. Minma, now realizing he was caught red-handed, yelled defensively. Hey, why did you tell them that? Mito glared at him, her eyes sharp with anger. Shut up, brat. Be glad he didn't kill you like he did those demon brothers. Don't act like you didn't deserve it. Kushina, still silent, was visibly shaking. Mito's words cut through her, forcing her to confront the painful truth. Then Mito turned back to her mother, her voice heavy with emotion. No, Mom, she said. Tell me, what's his favorite food? When was the last time you cooked it for him? Or even asked him about it? Kushina faltered. She couldn't answer. Exactly, Mito replied, her voice full of sorrow. You don't know? You never even bothered to ask, because as Naruto said, you never saw him. You never loved him. Kushina looked like she had been struck by a heavy blow. The words stung more than she ever imagined they would. She had failed her son in the most painful way. Mito softened a little, looking at her mother with sad eyes. There is something wrong with me too, Mom, she admitted quietly. I didn't hate Naruto, but I turned a blind eye to his suffering. I didn't love him like I should have. I ignored him just as much as you did. Kushina's heart twisted in regret, but it was too much to take in at once. Kakashi, who had been silently watching, now spoke again, his tone filled with disappointment. Kushina-san, you and Sensei always give speeches about family in public or gatherings and say how perfect it is. But in reality, it's broken. I'm disappointed in you both. The words hung in the air, and the weight of everything that had been said seemed to suffocate the room. Everyone had their own regrets, their own guilt to carry, and for the first time, it felt like they all saw the cracks in the facade of their so-called perfect lives. A week later, Zabuza and Haku launched another attack. Kakashi was just about to deliver the final blow when, in an unexpected move, Naruto intervened. He swiftly saved Zabuza, pushing him out of harm's way, and allowed Haku to escape. The group was in shock, unsure of Naruto's intentions. As the tension began to settle, Gato appeared, accompanied by his thugs, demanding control over the situation. Without hesitation, Naruto stepped forward, his eyes cold with determination. He ruthlessly ended Gato's life in a brutal and unforgiving manner, showing no mercy. His actions were swift and decisive, sending a chilling message to anyone who dared cross him. The mission was officially completed. Tazuna, grateful for their assistance, named the newly completed bridge the Great Naruto Bridge, a testament to the strength and will that Naruto had displayed throughout the ordeal. As the group made their way back to the village, Kushina couldn't hold back anymore. Her heart weighed heavy with guilt, and she took a step toward Naruto. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Naruto, I know I failed you. I want to apologize. I never meant to hurt you, not really. Naruto didn't even glance in her direction. His gaze remained fixed ahead, the sharp edge of his silence louder than any words. The damage is done, he said flatly, his tone colder than the wind blowing through the trees. You can apologize all you want, but it won't change anything. Kushina's heart sank as she took a hesitant step closer, desperate to make him understand. Please, Naruto, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to feel neglected. I never wanted you to feel like you weren't loved. Naruto finally turned to face her, his eyes sharp with bitterness. You're not sorry, Kushina. Not really. His words struck her like a slap. What you're feeling is guilt. Not regret, not love. Guilt. He took a breath, his voice becoming colder. If this had stayed in the shadows, if I hadn't exposed it all to the world, you would have let it slide, wouldn't you? He paused, his eyes locking onto hers with unyielding intensity. You'd keep pretending, going on like nothing ever happened. But now that the truth is out in the open, you're only feeling sorry because people know, not because you care. Kushina opened her mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. She wanted to apologize, to make things right, but the raw truth in Naruto's voice made her feel like everything she said would be meaningless. Naruto turned away from her, his back now to the whole group. I don't need your apology, he muttered quietly, more to himself than anyone else. The past is done, and I'm done with all of you. Without another word, he continued walking ahead, leaving Kushina standing there, feeling the weight of her failures settle deeper into her heart. They reported their actions to the Hokage. Minato's face tightened as he asked, "Why did you continue with such a dangerous mission? It wasn't your place to make that decision." Naruto stood with a cold demeanor, his voice unyielding. "It was my decision. I did what I wanted to do it, and I didn't compel your precious wife and two adorable kids to come with me. They came on their own," he said, his eyes unwavering. Minato's tone rose, his anger growing. "You defied the orders of your superiors. You disrespected me, the Hokage." Naruto's response was as sharp as ever. "I don't care if you're the Hokage or not. The truth is, you don't act like one, so don't think just because you sit in the Hokage seat, you've earned my respect. I am the Hokage, and I am your father," Minato roared, his voice filled with authority. Naruto scoffed, an icy smirk crossing his face. "Oh really?" he mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Since when did you start seeing me as your son?" He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing into a deadly glare. "All my life, you hated me. You ignored me. You favored those two brats over me. Minma and Mito, your perfect little children." Minato's expression faltered, but Naruto wasn't done. His voice grew sharper, more cutting. "You didn't care about me. You forged records to hide my achievements. Beat me when I dared question your decisions. You let the village tear me down while you watched. You never, not once, treated me like a son." Minato's breath hitched, his heart sinking under the weight of Naruto's words. His vision blurred for a moment, the guilt and regret consuming him. But Naruto wasn't finished. "You're pathetic," Naruto spat. "Pathetic as a father and as Hokage. You chose those brats. And now you want me to believe you're some kind of hero, some kind of father figure." He stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "You failed me, Minato, and you'll never fix it. Not now. Not ever." Minato flinched as if each word was a physical blow. His mind raced, searching for something to say, something to make it right. But nothing came. All he could do was stand there, feeling the distance between him and Naruto grow wider with each passing second. Naruto stood still for a moment, the weight of his decision heavy on his shoulders. His back was turned to the village, to the people who had wronged him, and to the family that had failed him. He took a deep breath, and his voice rang out, cold and resolute. "I'm done with this village. Done with all of you." His words echoed through the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. "I'm leaving. I don't need your pity, your apologies, or your false love." He paused, his eyes staring straight ahead, unwavering. "From now on, I'm renouncing my family name. I am just Naruto. Just Naruto. No Uzumaki, no Namikaze." Mito, with her face filled with concern, took a step forward, trying to reach him. "Naruto, please don't," she began, her voice pleading. But Naruto didn't turn to face her. He didn't need to see the expression on her face. The hurt, the regret, the pity, it meant nothing to him now. He took another step forward, his body tense with the decision he had already made. "No, Mito," he said, his voice low and firm. "Don't bother trying to stop me. I've had enough." Mito reached out, but he sidestepped her without even looking. "Naruto, please." She begged one last time, but Naruto was already moving. He walked past her, the pain in his chest now a familiar companion. But this time, it wasn't a weakness, it was his strength. Without another word, Naruto walked away from the village, from his past, from everything he had known. The distant sound of his footsteps was the only thing that remained in the wake of his departure. He was done, and for the first time in his life, he felt the freedom of truly being himself. Just Naruto. Naruto sat in stillness, his mind clear, his plan finally set into motion. He spoke to Sukuna, his inner presence, with calm determination. The plan begins now. Sukuna responded from within his mind, its tone steady. Yes, it's time. Naruto embarked on his journey, traveling for days through unfamiliar terrain, until he found the two figures he sought, Zabuza and Haku. They were sitting by a campfire, their faces grim and weary from the trials they had endured. Naruto approached without hesitation, his presence commanding attention. I'm not here to fight, Naruto began, his voice steady, yet carrying a weight of authority. I'm here to offer you something. Zabuza, ever the skeptic, narrowed his eyes. And what's that? Another promise of power or a foolish offer? Naruto remained calm, unaffected by the tone. I'm creating a village, a place called Ryamen. It'll be a sanctuary for outcasts like us, those who have been betrayed, those who have been neglected, the orphans, the lost souls. My goal is to make Ryamen the strongest, a place of peace. Zabuza stared at him, still unsure. Why should we trust you? Why should we join you? Naruto's eyes hardened slightly, but his voice was unwavering. Because I saved you, Zabuza. Do you want to run for the rest of your life, always looking over your shoulder? Or do you want to stand tall, respected, and safe? Haku looked at Naruto, his expression conflicted but curious. And if we join you, what's the guarantee? How can we trust that you won't betray us like everyone else? Naruto's gaze softened, and he took a step closer. If you join me, I'll make sure you are safe, Haku. I'll make sure you're treated with respect, and that no one ever dares to put you down again. This is not about me. It's about creating something better for all of us. Zabuza rubbed his chin thoughtfully, clearly considering the offer. Even if we wanted to, we're still affiliated with the Mist. The village is in the middle of a civil war. We can't just abandon that easily. Naruto met his gaze, unflinching. If you join me, I will end the civil war. You won't need to run anymore. Zabuza was silent for a moment, the weight of the words sinking in. Even if we agree, there's still the matter of Meiterumi. She's the rebel leader, and she might become the next Mizukichi. She's not likely to let us go that easily. Naruto's expression remained calm, his resolve unshaken. Then I'll speak to her. I'll handle it. If you trust me, this will be the beginning of something new for all of us. Zabuza and Haku exchanged looks, their hesitation still present, but Naruto's words hung in the air like a promise. Slowly, they nodded. We'll follow you, Zabuza said, his voice steady but reluctant. Naruto smiled, though it was more of a knowing smirk. Good. Then let's end this war and build a place where we don't have to run anymore. With that, the three of them set off toward the hidden mist, Naruto leading the way. The winds of change were already stirring, and the future of Ryamen was starting to take shape. A few days later, Naruto, Zabuza, and Haku arrived at the hidden mist village. As they approached the village gates, they were met by none other than Meiterumi, the Mizukichi herself, her expression a mixture of suspicion and authority. Naruto stepped forward, his eyes sharp and calculating. I've come to make a deal, he said, his voice steady. I'll end the civil war in an hour. But in exchange, you have to let Zabuza go free. Mei narrowed her eyes at him. And why should I believe you? What's in this for me? How do I know you won't betray us like everyone else has? Naruto's gaze was unwavering, a sense of calm certainty radiating from him. I have my plans, he said simply, his confidence unsettling. You want to end the bloodshed. This is your chance. Mei didn't immediately respond, her mind working through the implications. You're asking a lot. You want me to just let Zabuza go? What guarantee do I have that you can actually end this war? She asked, her voice laced with doubt. Naruto's expression hardened slightly, impatience creeping into his tone. How many more shinobi need to die before you act? Hundreds are already losing their lives. Do you want to continue playing games while the village burns, or do you want to save lives? His eyes locked with hers, daring her to hesitate further. You can either let me handle this, or watch more blood spill. The choice is yours. Mei clenched her fists, frustration mounting. She was a leader, but the weight of this decision weighed heavily on her shoulders. Finally, after a tense silence, she spoke, her voice tight. "Fine, I'll allow it, but I'll come with you. I need to see this for myself." Naruto nodded once, an acknowledgement of her decision. "Of course, let's move quickly." Without wasting another moment, they set out. The group traveled swiftly through the village's dense terrain, reaching the battlefield where Yagura, the former Mizukage, was entrenched with his forces. The mist forces, under his rule, had long been a thorn in the side of the village, and Yagura himself was said to be a powerful and ruthless leader. However, Naruto was undeterred. They arrived in stealth, slipping past the remaining shinobi with ease. Naruto, now fully in control of his strength, unleashed his cleave and dismantle techniques. The shinobi who tried to confront him were cut down with surgical precision, their bodies falling in pieces as if they had never existed. Finally, they reached Yagura. The former Mizukage, sitting confidently atop his throne, narrowed his eyes as he noticed their approach. Before he could say a word, Naruto moved like lightning. With one clean swing, his cleave sliced through Yagura's body, severing it into multiple pieces. Blood sprayed in all directions, and the former Mizukage was no more. Naruto stood over the fallen body, his breath even, his face impassive. "See? I kept my word." Mei, who had been silently watching, felt a chill run down her spine. She had known Yagura was a monster, but to witness his life snuffed out so effortlessly, so casually, it was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. "You?" she began, her voice shaky, but she couldn't find the words. She had underestimated him. Naruto wiped the blood from his blade, his expression still unreadable. "The war is over. You're welcome." Zabuza, who had been silent throughout the whole ordeal, looked at Naruto with a sense of newfound respect. This wasn't just a man of words. He was a man of action, a force that even the strongest of leaders could not ignore. Mei exhaled sharply, her mind racing. "The war is over," she repeated softly, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. I don't know what to say." "Then don't," Naruto said, his voice cold. With the first step toward building Ramen complete, Naruto, Zabuza, and Haku continued their journey. They took in orphans and betrayed genins, promising them a place free from betrayal. Naruto trained them, while Zabuza taught Kenjutsu and Water Jutsu, and Naruto focused on wind techniques. In just a few months, trust grew between them. Naruto gave shelter to more orphans, training those who were willing. The bond between the groups strengthened, and Ramen began to take shape, one step at a time. The students trained by Naruto and Zabuza improved rapidly, growing from beginners to mid-chunin level in just a few months. Naruto made sure they learned to work as a team, even though they were divided into two teams. With the chunin exams approaching, Naruto taught them the body flicker technique, enhancing their speed and coordination. "Remember, even if you're in two teams, you're one team," Naruto told them, his voice firm yet encouraging. "Don't fight unnecessarily, and don't put yourselves at risk. If you fail, it's not the end. We'll try again. Look out for each other's backs." The teams were set. Hurin, Run, and Jin made up one team, under Haku's guidance. The second team, Meizu, Mai, and Misa, was led by Zabuza. Together, they set off for Konoha, each team prepared and eager for the upcoming Chunin exams. As they traveled, Naruto reminded them, "Show Konoha what you're capable of, but remember, it's not just about passing the exams. It's about proving to yourselves what you've learned and how far you've come. Make me proud. Make them regret ever turning their backs on you." Naruto told them, his voice calm but firm. "Don't seek revenge. Make them question why they betrayed you in the first place." With that, he stayed behind in Ramen, watching his students depart for the Chunin exams. Naruto stayed behind in Ramen, quietly watching over the children he'd taken in, each one a reminder of the world's cruelty and his promise to change it. With Gato's company now under his control, now named Ramen Industries, and its funds redirected, Naruto turned to the next step, building the village from the ground up. He called in one of Gato's former architects, now loyal to Ramen. When they met, Naruto laid out his vision plainly. No statues, no walls to divide people. Training grounds, shelter, clean water, and open skies. This village isn't built for power. It's built for those the world threw away. The architect studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll begin the designs. Naruto simply said, make it a home. During the Chunin exams, both Team Haku and Team Zabuza stood out. On Naruto's orders, they avoided unnecessary violence. But when cornered, they didn't hesitate. A sound ninja fell during one of the matches, the only casualty. Whispers about the mysterious village called Ryamen rippled through the ranks of Jinin and Jonin alike. After the preliminaries, all 6 of Ryamen's Jinin advanced with ease. Their precision, teamwork, and discipline didn't go unnoticed. In the stands, Kakashi, Kushina, Sasuke, Sakura, Mito, Minma, and Mina approached Zabuza and Haku. What are you doing here? Kushina asked, eyeing them warily. We're here for our Jinin teams, Zabuza replied flatly. Kakashi frowned. Your headbands, they're not from the mist. What village are you representing? You noticed, Haku said calmly. We're no longer affiliated with the Hidden Mist. We now serve Ryamen. Ryamen, Mito repeated, scoffing. That new village? It's barely a few months old. How can it produce genin this skilled? Zabuza scoffed. Hard work beats entitlement. Unlike those who think being the Hokage's children makes them invincible. Minma's eyes narrowed, growling under his breath. Then Zabuza looked around. Speaking of blondes, where's the other one? The kid who saved us. The real deal, not this fake one. Pointing at Minma. Kushina and Mito stiffened at the mention of Naruto. A shadow passed over their faces. He left the village, Kushina admitted quietly. Haku's brow furrowed. Why? We neglected him, Kushina said, her voice laced with guilt. Ignored him for too long. Zabuza and Haku fell silent, offering no comfort, only judgment in their gaze. Minato's voice echoed through the arena. The preliminary rounds are over. The final stage will take place in 1 month. With that, Team Haku and Team Zabuza quietly left Konoha, making their way back to Ryamen. Kirin looked confused. Why are we leaving already? Zabuza glanced at her. We'll be back in a month. But the other teams are staying in Konoha, Ma pointed out. We know, Zabuza said sharply. But that place isn't home. Not for us. Is it because what Naruto-sama went in this village? Asked Rin. Zabuza and Haku remained silent. They thought is as yes, and they stayed silent over the journey. In Konoha, Minato sat in the strategy room, scanning the recent reports from the Chunin exams. His eyes lingered on one name, Ryamen. A newly formed village, producing genin this skilled in just a few months, he muttered, brows furrowed. How is that possible? Just then, the doors opened. Jiraiya strolled in, waving lazily. Yo, Minato. Thought I'd drop in and check on my favorite students. Minato smiled faintly and stood to greet him. It's good to see you, Jiraiya-sensei. After a few casual greetings, Minato's tone turned more serious. Would you consider training Mito and Minma for the finals? Jiraiya nodded. Of course. But what about the other one? That boy, what was his name, Naruto? Last I heard, he was a prodigy even beyond Itachi. Where is he? Minato lowered his head in silence. Just then, Kushina entered with Mito and Minma following behind. Jiraiya gave them his usual toothy grin. There's my god kids. He looked around. Hey, where's Naruto? Kushina hesitated, her expression tightening. Before she could answer, Minma scoffed. TCH, don't bring up that traitor. Smack. Mito's hand came down hard on the back of Minma's head. Don't you dare call him that, she snapped. This whole mess, him leaving, us losing him, it started because you were too lazy to train and expected things to be handed to you, and Mom and Dad treated him like trash. Minma clenched his jaw, rubbing the back of his head, but said nothing. Jiraiya's smile faded. His eyes, usually playful, turned cold. He left, he asked softly. Kushina nodded. And I don't think he's coming back. Jiraiya frowned. I'm asking again, where's Naruto? Kushina looked away, shame etched across her face. He left the village, he cut all ties with us. Jiraiya's expression hardened. Left? What? Minato said nothing. It was Kushina who answered. Because we treated him like he didn't matter. Jiraiya stared at her, disbelief creeping into his tone. And you didn't think to tell me? If I had known, I would have found him, helped him. When did this happen? A few months ago, Minato muttered. Jiraiya exhaled slowly, voice bitter. Minato, Kushina, how could you be so blind? You neglected Naruto, your own son, for the sake of the Jinchuriki. There was a pause, thick and uncomfortable. Then Mito spoke quietly. It wasn't just neglect. Everyone turned to her. From what I remember, Dad hated Naruto with vigor. He swapped Naruto's grades with Minma's in the academy to make Minma look more talented. Mito, Kushina gasped. But she continued. We were all a team. Me, Minma, and Naruto. But Mom never once called Naruto for training. Every time we went out to train, he was left behind. Silence settled like a heavy fog. Jiraiya clenched his fists. You didn't lose him because he was weak, he said coldly. You lost him because you made him believe he didn't belong. Jiraiya turned to Minato, voice low but sharp. What is this, Minato? How can you love one child and hate the other? Minato stayed silent, his head lowered. Jiraiya's gaze shifted to Kushina. And you, Kushina, you're in value family more than anything. How could you turn your back on your own son? Kushina's hands trembled, guilt burning behind her eyes. I don't know where I went wrong teaching you. Jiraiya continued, disappointment thick in his voice. But I never expected this from you. Then he turned to Minma. And you, blaming Naruto because you're too lazy to work hard? Minma snapped back, raising his voice. I didn't blame him. He used some secret scrolls to get strong. Silence fell across the room like a hammer. Then, smack, Mito struck Minma on the back of his head. Idiot, she hissed. How many times do I have to tell you? He read the same scrolls we read. She glared at him. He reads. He trains. He doesn't waste time bragging about being the Hokage's kid. He's naturally gifted, but he worked harder than all of us combined. Minma rubbed his head, but said nothing. Jiraiya's voice softened, but only slightly. And you all let him walk away thinking he didn't matter. Jiraiya crossed his arms, staring Minma down. Boy, if you keep acting like this, you're going to get yourself killed. You've got two options. Either drop the dream of being a shinobi or leave that laziness behind and work. The room went quiet. No way, Minma shouted, eyes wide. I dreamed of becoming Hokage. Jiraiya didn't flinch. Then come outside. Show me what you've got. They headed to the training grounds. The test was short, brutal, one-sided. Minma collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, soaked in sweat. You can't even last 5 minutes, Jiraiya said coldly. And you're breathing like you fought a war. If you go into battle like this, you'll die before your mission starts. At this level, you can't even call yourself a genin. In fact, you should still be in academy. Minma's face went pale. Why, you're lying? You're only saying this because you're mad Naruto left. Jiraiya shook his head slowly. No, ask any other genin. Hell, even your teammates. They'd say the same. Minato and Kushina stood in silence, their heads bowed. You two were too blinded by pride, Jiraiya said harshly. You neglected one son emotionally and destroyed the other through arrogance. Jiraiya turned to Minma, voice like steel. You've got 1 month. I'm going to whip you into shape myself. If you fail the exams after that, you give up the dream of being a shinobi. Minma gulped, silent. Good, Jiraiya said, walking off. Training starts tomorrow at dawn. Don't be late. From that moment on, Jiraiya took full responsibility for Minma's training. No excuses, no shortcuts. At the same time, Kushina, shaken by everything, focused her energy on helping Mito grow stronger. In the shadow of their guilt, both parents finally stepped up, but whether it was too late, only time would tell. A month passed, and the day of the finals finally arrived. The atmosphere was charged with excitement as everyone eagerly awaited the matches. Naruto, now the leader of Ryaman Village, decided to attend. He sat in the VIP section, and whispers immediately began circulating. People had heard that he was the head of the newly formed village, and curiosity buzzed in the air. The first match of the day was between Minma and Kirin. Naruto, observing from the VIP area, turned to Mikoto and asked, "Is that the Hokage's son?" Mikoto nodded. "Yes, that's Minma." "I heard he's useless," Naruto remarked casually, a hint of derision in his tone. A few people nearby snickered, but Mikoto, who was present, frowned at the comment. "Watch your mouth," Mikoto warned, her voice stern. Naruto shrugged, unfazed. "What? I'm just saying what the Jonins in my village said. They encountered him before and said he's all bark, no bite." Before Mikoto could respond, Kushina entered the VIP area and sat beside her. Upon hearing the conversation, Kushina's expression darkened. "Kushina, this boy is blabbering about Minma and bad-mouthing him," Mikoto said, looking at Naruto with concern. "I'm not bad-mouthing anyone," Naruto replied coolly. "I'm just stating the truth." Kushina froze as she recognized the voice. "Naruto," she called out, her tone a mix of surprise and longing. Naruto turned his gaze toward her, his face emotionless. "Hello, mother," he said, his voice cold, void of the affection it once held. Kushina felt a pang in her chest, the lack of warmth in his words hitting her harder than she expected. She struggled to mask her pain as she asked, "What are you doing here? We've been looking for you." Naruto, his eyes distant, replied nonchalantly, "I'm here to represent my village, Ryamen. As its leader, I'm obligated to attend." Mikoto, still surprised by the revelation, asked, "You're the leader of Ryamen? But how could such a new village produce talented genin so quickly?" Naruto's gaze shifted to the ongoing match, but he answered without hesitation. "Unlike the genins of Konoha, my genins work hard. They don't brag about their skills or about being clan heirs, even though they have natural talent. I made sure of that they work twice harder than ever." Kushina's heart sank as she absorbed his words, guilt creeping into her. "Naruto, why did you leave us?" she asked, her voice soft with regret. Mikoto turned to Kushina in confusion. "Is he really your son?" Kushina nodded, the weight of years lost pressing on her shoulders. Naruto met Kushina's gaze, his expression as distant as ever. "Don't you know the reason?" he replied, his words cold, filled with unspoken pain. While the VIPs continued speaking, the match between Minma and Kirin began. Minma struggled from the start. Kirin, precise and efficient, showed no interest in dragging things out. With a swift chop to Minma's neck, he knocked him unconscious. Gasps echoed across the stadium. The crowd was stunned by how quickly it ended. "He's really strong," Mikoto said, impressed. "Yes, his specialty is targeting pressure points," Naruto replied calmly. "He doesn't believe in wasting time." "Did you train him?" Kushina asked. Naruto nodded, along with Zabuza and Haku. The matches went on, building tension toward the final bout, Sasuke versus Gaara. Sasuke initially had the upper hand. His speed and precision pushed Gaara into a corner. But then, Gaara lost control. With a twisted scream, his body began to morph, forming a miniature version of Shikaku, the one-tailed beast. Suddenly, a massive explosion shook the stadium as the rooftop was blown apart. A wave of Jinjutsu spread over the audience, paralyzing many. The invasion had begun. Suna and the Sound Village forces poured in, led by Orochimaru. Naruto's expression darkened. Fury surged within him. Without hesitation, he jumped from the VIP area and gave chase after Gaara. Sasuke and several Konoha genin followed closely behind, but Naruto moved like a blur. He caught up to Gaara first. Kankuro and Temari rushed in to protect their brother, but Naruto didn't slow down. His eyes held no mercy. With a swift combination of cleave and dismantle, he cut down the siblings without hesitation. They fell lifeless. To Naruto's surprise, Shikaku didn't emerge from Gaara's corpse. Of course, if the Jinchuriki dies, the tailed beast dies too. To be clear, he didn't understand what he did. Moments later, Sasuke and the other genin arrived, only to stop in shock at the sight, Gaara and his siblings dead, and Naruto standing silently among them. Mito saw him and rushed forward, tears in her eyes. "Ni-san." She reached out to hug him, but Naruto stopped her with a firm push. His voice was flat, Don't. Mito froze, stunned. The Naruto they once knew was no longer the same. Chapter 2. No. The voice was cold, flat, lifeless. Everyone froze. Mito felt a chill run through her spine. The others, Sasuke, Shikamaru, Sakura, and Shino, stood stunned. None of them had seen Naruto in months. And now here he was. But not the Naruto they remembered. He looked completely different. His spiky blonde hair had grown longer, more wild. His body was leaner, stronger. He wore a black half-sleeved shirt, black pants, and boots. His Hitai no longer bore the symbol of the hidden leaf. It was something else entirely, something foreign. He wasn't the same. Naruto, where have you been? Mito's voice cracked, laced with worry. Do you have any idea how much we missed you? Naruto's eyes narrowed. We? He asked, voice emotionless. Yes, me, Mom, Dad, Minma, we've all been worried. Naruto scoffed, his voice turning bitter. Don't call them my mom and dad. They lost that right a long time ago. They're just the ones who gave birth to me. Mito flinched. And you, he continued, voice sharpening. Since when did you start caring about me? I've always cared, she insisted, stepping forward. Do you really expect me to believe that? Naruto said, his tone rising with anger. As far as I remember, I was treated like trash. Like I didn't matter. No, Naruto, that's not true. Then tell me. He cut her off. What changed? Mito stayed silent. If it was because of the wave mission, or that day when I finally snapped, don't pretend that changed anything. Naruto said, his voice filled with quiet fury. If I hadn't spoken up, nothing would be different. You would have kept ignoring me. So don't act like it never happened. Silence fell over the group like a thick fog. And then, Naruto vanished. Just like that. No one spoke. Not at first. Sasuke stared at the empty space where Naruto had stood. He clenched his fists. He understood, at least a little. He had been there that day. He'd heard Naruto's pain. And now he felt a deep regret gnawing at him. Naruto had been the only one to see Sasuke for himself, not as Itachi's little brother. The only one who dared to challenge him, to stand beside him. Sasuke had never returned that. He should have. What a drag, Shikamaru muttered, his voice low and serious. His eyes drifted to Gaara's lifeless body. He killed Gaara like it was nothing. At Chunin exam ground. High above the stadium, the battle raged. Minato, Jiraiya, and Hiruzen stood against a terrifying enemy, Orochimaru and the reanimated first and second Hokages. But the undead founders of Konoha, bound by the Edo Tensei, were invincible. No matter how much damage they took, they simply regenerated. Hiruzen's brow furrowed. He knew what had to be done. Minato, Jiraiya, fall back. I have a plan, Hiruzen said grimly. What is it, sensei? Jiraiya asked. Hiruzen didn't answer. Instead, he began forming hand signs. Both Jiraiya and Minato recognized it immediately, the Death Reaper seal. Sensei, no. Jiraiya yelled in alarm. Are you crazy? That jutsu will kill you. Hiruzen smiled faintly. I've lived a long life, Jiraiya. I have few regrets, but two still haunt me. One, failing to end Orochimaru when I had the chance. And two, standing by and watching while Minato turned his back on Naruto. I should have helped that boy. Orochimaru let out a mocking laugh. Oh, Minato. Favoritism over talent? What a shame. I know how your precious firstborn is all talk, while Naruto, now he was a genius. But you couldn't see past your pride. Shut up, you snake, Minato shouted, his voice raw with guilt and rage. Kukuku, did I hit a nerve, Minato? Orochimaru sneered, his serpentine eyes gleaming with malice. Deny it all you want, but deep down you know it's true. Minato clenched his fists, the guilt etched across his face like cracks in porcelain. Orochimaru's grin widened. I heard a rather fascinating tale. They say Naruto, your forgotten son, has built his own village. Trained genin who've surpassed even Konoha's best, and all in a matter of months. No academy, no elite jonin senseis, just him. He chuckled darkly. Imagine what he could have become if I had met him first. He would have made a magnificent ally. Strong, smart, unshackled by your village's hypocrisy. Minato's eyes burned with pain and fury. You bastard, he shouted, lightning crackling around his fists. Kukuku, you abandoned greatness, Minato. Orochimaru said, voice cold now. Oh, I'm flattered you think of me so highly, came a calm, cutting voice from behind them. Everyone turned. Naruto stood at the edge of the rooftop. Even the reanimated first and second Hokages paused, curious. Naruto walked forward slowly, his eyes locking onto the undead forms of the village's founders. You're creepy, Orochimaru, but summoning them? Naruto said, nodding toward the first and second. I didn't think you were that desperate. Orochimaru grinned. Think about it. The very founders of Konoha, destroying what they once built. Poetic, isn't it? No, Naruto said coldly. It's pathetic. Orochimaru's grin faltered. What did you say? I said, if I were you, I would have brought back Madara Uchiha, Naruto replied casually. At least he had a real grudge. He defected for a reason. You have a point, Orochimaru admitted thoughtfully. But you're wasting your time with Konoha, Naruto continued. What do you mean? Orochimaru asked, genuinely intrigued. Naruto's eyes darkened. The image you see of Konoha is just a mask. Shallow, fragile, a village that preaches will of fire but practices favoritism. A Hokage who turns a blind eye to injustice and calls it leadership. A place where people can't even tell the difference between a kunai and a sealing scroll. He paused. I was hated, beaten, feared. Everyone believed I was the QB reincarnated. But the truth is, I never had the QB sealed inside me. I was a scapegoat, a child to carry blame, to wear hatred, Naruto said bitterly. All while your golden child, Minma, bathed in your love. Even the first Hokage, Hashirama, seemed disturbed. This isn't the Konoha I built. Tobirama nodded gravely. Favoritism weakens a village from within. Naruto called Minato with guilt and concern, but Naruto didn't budge. Hey, old man. Naruto's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Calm, cold, controlled. What are you trying to do? Hiruzen didn't stop his hand signs. His expression was solemn. What I should have done years ago. I'm ending him. Naruto's gaze narrowed. You think you can? Be honest. He's like a snake. He'll slither away before you finish the jutsu. Orochimaru chuckled, slowly clapping. Well, Naruto, I didn't know you held me in such high regard. No, Naruto said flatly. You're just a bastard that needs to be put down. Orochimaru's smile twitched, his ego dented, though he masked it well. You heard me right, Naruto continued. I don't want you hindering me in the future, so I'm ending you now. Brat, Orochimaru snarled. You really think you can kill me? You're delusional. I'm not, Naruto replied simply. In one motion, he formed a single hand sign. Slash, slash, slash. The only sound that followed was the sharp slicing of wind. Orochimaru blinked, then staggered. A heartbeat later, his body collapsed, neatly cut into dozens of small cubes, sliced so finely they perfect held shape. Silence. Everyone stood frozen, stunned. The Edo Tensei broke. Hashirama and Tobirama's gained control over themselves. Outside the barrier, the ENBU stood in shock. Orochimaru's barrier team stared in disbelief, their jutsu faltering as their master lay in pieces. Wait, Naruto, Hiruzen asked, still reeling. How did you even get inside the barrier? Naruto glanced at him. Does it matter? The snake is dead. Be glad. He won't cause any more pain or torment anyone else. Hiruzen had no answer. Naruto. A voice stopped him. Minato. Naruto turned. Minato stepped forward, remorse and guilt etched deep across his face. Can you come back? Please. We can be a family again. I know I failed you. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll change. There was a heavy silence. Naruto shook his head. No, I have things to do. People who need me. I won't turn my back on them. Please, Naruto, Minato pleaded. I know you don't owe us anything, but at least come for your mother. She's not herself since you left. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly he spoke. I'll ask you one question, he said. Answer it honestly. Lie to me, and you'll have a grave next to Orochimaru. Minato nodded shakily. Why did you treat me like that? Naruto asked, voice laced with pain. Why did you hate me? Why did you swap my grades with that fool? Why didn't you once ask how I was doing? Minato's lips parted, but no words came. He stood silent, ashamed, unable to look his son in the eye. Naruto closed his eyes, as if the silence was answer enough. You don't have one, he said quietly. So don't bother me again. He raised his hand, sending chakra into the seal etched into his palm, a signal to his team. Without another word, Naruto turned and walked away. And with that, he was gone, leaving behind dust, silence, and the weight of everything left unsaid. The smoke from the battle still lingered in the air, but the invasion had stopped. News spread like wildfire through the village. Orochimaru was dead. The unthinkable had happened. From the rooftop, Naruto stood tall, his cloak fluttering in the wind, a quiet intensity burning in his eyes. He had just returned from delivering a fatal blow to one of the legendary Sannin. Shock swept across the hidden leaf. No one had expected it, not like this. Suddenly, Kabuto Yakushi appeared, his face twisted with rage as he confronted Naruto. You killed Orochimaru-sama, he demanded, his voice trembling with fury. Naruto's gaze was cold, calculating. Yes, he replied without hesitation. He was a hindrance to my plans. Now you have a choice. Join me, or die. Kabuto's eyes narrowed. Why would I ever join you? He spat. Orochimaru is dead, Naruto said flatly. What will you do now? You won't survive in this village. Everyone knows your betrayal. You're a walking corpse unless you switch sides. Kabuto stood defiant. My loyalty lies with Orochimaru-sama, even in death. Elsewhere, the rookie Jinin, Shikamaru, Mito, Minma, and others arrived at the Chunin exam arena, carrying the lifeless bodies of Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro. Their eyes were heavy with sorrow. Baki, the Sand sibling sensei, sat tied up along with several captured Sand shinobi. The rest of the invading Sound and Sand forces lay dead. Kakashi, upon seeing the fallen Kazakage children, approached with dread in his eyes. You killed them? He asked. No, Mito replied solemnly. Naruto did. Kakashi's breath caught. Naruto is here. Yes, said Shikamaru. He killed the three, without even breaking a sweat. Before Kakashi could respond, a Jounin dropped from the rooftop. Orochimaru is dead, he said breathlessly. Killed by Naruto. The news struck like lightning. What? Gasped Minma. Orochimaru is a Sannin. How? Without delay, Kakashi and the Genin rushed to the rooftop to confirm it for themselves. Atop the tower stood Minato, flanked by Jiraiya and Hiruzen. Their faces were grim, each filled with a mix of shock, sorrow, and contemplation. Dad, Mito and Minma called out. Minato turned to them slowly, his eyes shadowed with sadness. Kakashi stepped forward. Did Naruto really kill Orochimaru? Yes, Hiruzen said quietly. Asterisk, he used a technique I've never seen before. It was as if nothing had happened, but then, moments later, Orochimaru collapsed, cut into pieces. They all looked toward the rooftop, where some flesh and remnants still remained. Wait, is that Orochimaru? Sasuke asked, his voice low. Hiruzen gave a silent nod. The truth was undeniable. Naruto had changed. And the world had no idea what was coming next. Naruto stood still, his gaze locked on Kabuto, whose rage was boiling over. You really don't want to live, do you? Naruto asked calmly, almost disappointed. You think you can kill my master and walk away unharmed? Kabuto roared, chakra surging violently around him. His eyes burned with fury. Naruto didn't flinch. I killed your master before he even realized he was dying. What makes you think you can do better? Kabuto didn't wait. He charged forward, Chakra scalpels ignited in both hands, aiming for Naruto's vitals. But in the blink of an eye, he stopped mid-stride, frozen. Then, without a sound, Kabuto collapsed, dead. As the wind carried away the last traces of battle, Zabuza, Haku, and Naruto's Genin team approached from the shadows. "It's done," Naruto said, turning to them. "We're leaving." "But what about the exams? And promotions?" Haku asked softly. Naruto sighed. "Forget them. You can take the exams again in 6 months. If not for the invasion, you all would have made Chunin. But that snake bastard ruined everything." Without another word, they turned their backs on Konoha and vanished into the distance. Few days later, Konoha. Reconstruction was underway. With Orochimaru's swift death, the village had avoided the worst-case scenario. Fewer deaths, fewer injuries, and the damage was being handled quickly. The rookie Genin, after spending the day helping with recovery efforts, gathered at a kimchi restaurant, the familiar comfort of food and friends providing a brief moment of peace. Ino looked stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Wait, you're serious? Naruto really killed the Sand siblings and Orochimaru?" Shikamaru leaned back with a tired sigh. "Troublesome. I've already said it twice. Are you deaf or just annoying today?" "But how?" Kiba asked, confused. "I mean, maybe I believe he beat the Sand siblings, but Orochimaru? He's a Sannin, one of the strongest shinobi alive." "Don't ask me," Choji said between mouthfuls. "We saw what was left on the roof." Kiba leaned in. "What do you mean, what was left?" "His corpse," Shikamaru said flatly. "The third Hokage said Naruto used a jutsu none of them had ever seen. One moment, Orochimaru was fine. The next, he just fell apart. Dead." Silence fell over the table. The weight of what had happened was only now starting to settle in. Naruto had changed, and no one knew what that meant for the future. In Council Room Konoha, the Hokage's office was heavy with silence, broken only by the rustle of papers and the occasional distant shout from shinobi working on reconstruction efforts outside. Konoha had just survived an invasion, but the dust hadn't settled, not politically, not emotionally. Danzo Shimura stood at the center of the room, his expression unreadable but his tone sharp as a kunai. "So you're telling me, your son, the boy who left the village, killed Orochimaru and the Kazekage's children?" Minato Namikaze, the yellow flash, didn't flinch. His eyes held a quiet fire as he replied, "Yes. We were there when he killed Orochimaru." Kohor Udatane leaned forward, concern etched into every wrinkle on her face. "Do you realize the political consequences this might cause?" Minato raised a brow. "What consequences?" "He killed the children of a Kage," she snapped. "Do you think Suna will just let that go?" The fourth Hokage let out a slow breath, measuring his words. "Have you all forgotten what war means? Casualties are inevitable. And let me remind you, Orochimaru tricked them. He murdered the Kazekage months ago and manipulated Suna into this invasion. Their forces are crippled. Their leadership is gone. They won't risk another war now. I just hope their council isn't foolish enough to act blindly." Shikaka Nara, leaning against the wall with his usual slouch, spoke up in a low, thoughtful voice. "What a drag. Honestly, if it weren't for Naruto, the casualties on our side would have been far worse. That jutsu he used to kill Orochimaru, no one's ever seen anything like it." Danzo's eyes narrowed. "That's exactly why we need to bring him back. He's a Konoha shinobi. We cannot allow someone of his power to remain rogue. What if he allies with another nation? Turns that power against us? And that technique, we must study it. Understand it. He was a mere genin, and yet he's producing students who fight like Chunin in a matter of months. Do you understand how far behind we've fallen?" Hamura Mitokado nodded gravely. "Yes, there are reports. He's built a village, called it Ryaman. He's hired Momochi Zabuza, and it's said he killed Yagura, the Mizukage, helped Mei Terumi end the civil war in the water country." The weight of those words sank into the room like a stone. Danzo stepped closer to the table, voice more insistent now. "You see? This is exactly what I've been saying. We must bring him back." But Hiruzen Tsurutobi, the third Hokage, finally spoke, his voice calm but tired. aged not just by years, but by the weight of too many battles. That won't be possible. He made it clear he wants nothing more to do with this village. And frankly, we should be grateful he didn't side with Orochimaru during the invasion. That jutsu he used, if he had turned it on Konoha, the village wouldn't be standing. And he wasn't even tired. He looked like he could keep going all day. He paused, letting that reality settle. Our priority now is rebuilding. We must show the other nations that Konoha is still strong, still stable, even after this. Our security must be tightened. Our front must be united. That boy, he's out there, yes. But for now, he is not our enemy. Danzo's voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as steel. So you're saying we just let that boy go on his own? Hiruzen closed his eyes for a moment, then gave a solemn nod. For now, yes. Danzo's gaze hardened as he leaned forward, voice sharp with accusation. Did you forget? He's a rogue shinobi now. We should officially label him as missing mean. Hiruzen shook his head slowly, his voice measured but firm. No, he officially left Konoha months ago. It seems he planned it well. Jiraiya stepped forward, holding a set of documents. These are his papers, he said, spreading them out before the council. Proof that he resigned from the village formally. Danzo scoffed, frustration evident. Somebody's foolishness cost us a potential shinobi. I've heard whispers. This boy isn't just a prodigy. He's a prodigy of prodigies. He's even surpassing Itachi Uchiha. Minato's anger flickered in his eyes, but he kept his voice steady, choosing silence over confrontation. Inoichi Yamanaka finally broke the tense quiet, cautious but seeking clarity. So we just leave him by himself. Minato's voice carried the weight of reluctant acceptance. Yes, we don't have any other choice. If anyone has suggestions, speak now, but they can't bring us more problems. The room fell into a heavy silence. Village hidden in sand council room. The council chamber of Sunagakure was suffocating with tension. The desert winds outside howled like a lament for the fallen. No one spoke at first. The silence itself was a memorial, a grim acknowledgement of their loss. But grief soon gave way to anger, and then to fear. We were deceived. A council member muttered bitterly, fists clenched on the table. That bastard Orochimaru killed the Kazekage. Temari, Kankuro, even Gaara, they're all dead. The One Tail is gone. We've lost not only our leaders, but our legacy. We're now the weakest of the 5 great nations. The words fell like sand through open fingers, unavoidable, undeniable. Ebi, one of the elder advisors, closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. We fell into his trap, and now we must face the consequences. Another voice rose, sharp and full of fury. We shouldn't let this slide. A cold glare cut through the air. I recommend you shut your mouth, Chiyo said curtly. Her tone brooked no argument. Even at her age, her presence was sharper than any blade. Ebi nodded grimly. For now, Baki will serve as the acting Kazekage. Baki, standing tall despite the weight of recent events, accepted the responsibility with a solemn nod. Our forces are weakened. With the Kazekage's death now known across the nations, we may face an invasion. We must regroup, rebuild. We should consider an alliance with the Hidden Leaf, Ebi added carefully. Have you lost your mind? Another council member snapped. The Leaf is the reason we lost everything. Don't forget, if not for them, the Kazekage would still live. No, Baki interjected, his voice steady. It wasn't Konoha. The attack came from someone else. Silence fell again. It was the leader of a newly formed village, Baki continued. A boy, Naruto, the son of the 4th Hokage. He renounced his family name only a few months ago. He's the one who trained a group of Genin into Chunin-level fighters in weeks. I can't even imagine what kind of training regimen he put them through. He paused, letting the shock settle in. And he didn't come alone. Zabuza Momochi fights beside him. The room went still. Whispers of a new power rising in the shadows of the great nations had been dismissed as rumors, until now. Now, Sunagakure faced not only the loss of its Kazekage, but the rise of a force that defied reason. The legacy of the sand lay in ruins. Hidden Leaf root chambers. Beneath the peaceful surface of Konoha, Hidden in the cold and lifeless corridors of the Root ANBU base, shadows stirred. Danzo Shimura stood still in the dim light, one arm resting behind his back, the other wrapped in thick bandages, secrets sealed beneath flesh. His single eye was closed, but his mind raced. So, he killed Orochimaru. Just like that. Naruto Namikaze. No, the boy who cast aside even his name. Soon, you will be under my control. He opened his eye. A Root ANBU operative knelt a few feet away, sensing the storm behind Danzo's calm. Danzo-sama. The masked operative spoke, voice measured and cold. How are you planning to bring him in? From the latest intelligence, he has his own village now. He's not a boy we can simply call back. Danzo's lips barely moved, but the words were ice. We will destroy it. A moment of stunned silence. That will surely break him, the Root agent said, hesitantly. But what if he retaliates? According to the reports, he himself is a one-man army. Some say he surpassed even the fourth Hokage. Danzo turned slowly, his single eye narrowing. Which is why we must plan this carefully. Every weakness must be identified. Every threat neutralized before it breathes. He stepped forward, his cane tapping softly against the metal floor. He may be powerful, but he is still young, driven by emotion, idealistic. That is where we will strike. The operative remained silent, but unease radiated from his posture. He had read the reports. Naruto had taken down Orochimaru. He was training others at an unnatural pace. And now, Zabuza Momochi stood beside him, loyal. Danzo's voice dropped to a whisper. Break the village. Sever his ties. Turn him against the world. Then, offer him salvation. A thin smile curled beneath the elder's wrinkled face. Konoha will be the only thing left for him to cling to. And thus, the seed of betrayal was sown. Deep beneath the village of the Leaf, a new war was beginning. One not fought with kunai or chakra, but with the shadows of ambition and the chains of control. With Jiraiya. Tanzakagai, a lively, chaotic town nestled far from the structured calm of Konoha. It was a haven for gamblers, drunkards, and those who had no desire to be found. For Jiraiya of the Sannin, it had taken days of tracking, masking his chakra signature so finely that even someone as sharp as Tsunade wouldn't notice. He couldn't let her slip away this time. Now, under the soft glow of evening lanterns, he moved through the crowded streets, scanning gambling houses, bars, and any place with the scent of sake and desperation. And finally, he found her. There she was, Tsunade Senju, the Slug Princess, legendary healer, and infamously terrible gambler. Sitting at a low table with a bottle of sake in hand, Shizune sitting at her side. Hello, Tsunade. Long time no see, Jiraiya said with a roguish grin, stepping into the light. Tsunade's expression barely shifted. Jiraiya, what are you doing here? And how did you even find me? What? Is it wrong for an old teammate to drop in? Jiraiya asked, feigning innocence. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Cut the crap. Why are you here? Jiraiya's tone turned serious. Orochimaru invaded Konoha. A few days ago. She paused, lifting her cup slowly. Yeah, I heard. So what? He used a forbidden jutsu, created by the Nidaime. Reanimated the Shodai and Nidaime Hokage. Controlled them. Turned them against the village. Tsunade's grip on the cup tightened. Her face darkened. What happened to them? Orochimaru's dead. The moment he said it, Tsunade choked on her sake, spraying it across the table. Even Shizune looked like she'd been slapped across the face. What? Who? Was it? Minato? Tsunade asked, still coughing. Jiraiya shook his head slowly. No, it was Naruto. The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. Tsunade blinked. Are you joking? You expect me to believe that? It's true. Sensei, Hiruzen, was about to use the dead demon-consuming seal. But before he could finish, Naruto appeared. Jiraiya paused, remembering the surreal moment. He didn't even move. He used a technique none of us had ever seen before. In the blink of an eye, Orochimaru was sliced to pieces. It wasn't even a fight. Tsunade stared at him, disbelief slowly being crushed by realization. What kind of technique does that? I don't know, Jiraiya admitted. But there's more. A few months ago, he officially renounced the Uzumaki and Namikaze names. Then he disappeared. Shizen frowned. Where did he go? He formed a new village. Named it Ryaman. There was a loud crack as Tsunade dropped her sake bottle. A kid, Naruto, made his own village, she said, voice rising. Why would he leave Konoha? His family? Everything. I don't have all the answers, Jiraiya said, his usual cheer completely gone. But I do know this. He sent Jinin from Ryaman to the Chunin exams. They were easily Chunin level, and none of them are even 14 yet. Tsunade sat back, stunned. The world was shifting, and fast. Jiraiya looked her in the eyes. Tsunade sat in stunned silence, sake dripping from her fingers, forgotten. The din of Tanzaku-gai's lively nightlife continued beyond the small tavern, but in the quiet booth where two of the legendary Sannin sat, the air felt thick, heavy with something darker than grief. Jiraiya leaned back against the wall, one arm slung over the back of the bench, voice quiet. And if you're wondering why he left the village and his family, you can blame Minato. Tsunade blinked, slowly turning toward him. What? Jiraiya nodded. From what I've heard, his sister Mito told me Minato treated Naruto like he was unwanted, neglected him, even resented him, at times. He gave all his attention to the Jinchuriki siblings instead. The girl, Mito, she has potential, Jiraiya said. She's a capable shinobi. Works hard, doesn't complain. But the other one, Minma, he's a waste of talent. No discipline, no drive. Couldn't pass the academy on merit if his life depended on it. His taijutsu's weak, chakra control's worse. I trained him personally for a month just to see if he had anything, barely improved. He looked Tsunade in the eye, and for a moment, the usual grin was nowhere to be seen. But Naruto? That boy's a monster of a prodigy. The kind we haven't seen in generations. Minato, he messed up. Big time. Tsunade sighed, rubbing her temples. But what about Kushina? She's his mother. She should have cared, at least. Jiraiya's voice dropped lower. She didn't hate him, but she didn't care either. Not really. She was too wrapped up in the other two. Especially Minma. Tsunade clenched her fists, anger boiling beneath her skin. What the hell is happening in Konoha? What's the point of being a parent, or a Hokage, if you let your own son be treated like that? And that's not even the worst part, Jiraiya continued. For years, most of the village treated Naruto like he was the Nine Tails. Like he was the demon itself, not its jailer. Fear, hatred, whispered insults, stares that could kill. A sharp crack echoed as Tsunade's hand shattered the ceramic sake cup in her grip. What? How can Minato and Kushina be so blind? Easy, Tsunade, Jiraiya said, glancing around. A few patrons were already looking their way. You're drawing attention. Tsunade let out a shaky breath and sat back. So, why are you telling me all this now? I'm planning to meet him, Jiraiya said quietly. Tsunade stared at him. To what? Convince him to come back? Did the council send you? No, Jiraiya said firmly. I'm going on my own. I need to know if he's a threat or not. No one knows what he's really doing out there. He's quiet. Too quiet. And if he really has the power to kill Orochimaru without lifting a finger, then he's not just a missing Nin. He met her gaze, and for the first time in years, she saw genuine concern in his eyes. If he's building something dangerous, if he's another Orochimaru, or worse, another Akatsuki, then we can't ignore it. If we do, it might be the end of the world. Tsunade frowned, uneasy. And if he is a threat? What then? You said it yourself. He's probably the strongest shinobi alive right now. What are you going to do about it? Jiraiya didn't answer right away. We'll worry about that later. Tsunade caught the word instantly. We? You're including me in this? What makes you think I'll go along with it? Jiraiya grinned faintly. Don't you want to see your godson again? See the village he's building with his own hands? Tsunade didn't respond. But she didn't say no either. So, will you tag along? Jiraiya asked, his tone unusually serious. Tsunade didn't answer immediately. Her eyes drifted toward the empty sake cup in front of her, mind tangled in thoughts of a boy she barely knew but was tied to by blood, fate, and old promises. After a long pause, she sighed. Fine, I'll come. But do you even know where he is? You said it's a newly formed village. Yeah, Jiraiya said, nodding. I dug up some intel. It's positioned just beyond the land of waves, straddling the borders of the water and fire countries. Smart location, isolated, but close to trade routes. Tsunade stood, already rolling her shoulders. Then we move at dawn. It's already late. The next morning, their journey began. It took them a full week to reach the outer perimeter of the village known as Ryaman. Along the way, they passed through dense forests, misty coastlines, and unfamiliar settlements, places not yet marked on shinobi maps. And when they arrived, the village wasn't what they expected. Simple structures, active construction sites, bustling civilians, and young shinobi sparring in open courtyards. A place not of grandeur, but of purpose. They stood before a modest gate where two guards, dressed in lightweight gray and black uniforms with minimalist red insignias, stepped forward. State your business, one of the guards said plainly. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. What? Don't you know who we are? We're the legendary Sannin. The guard didn't blink. You may be legendary, but in Ryaman, no one is above another. Everyone is treated equally, without title or reputation. So again, state your business. Or leave. Tsunade blinked. This place already feels different. Jiraiya sighed, raising both hands lazily. All right. We're here to meet Naruto. For what reason? I'm his godfather. She's his godmother. The guard paused for a moment, then nodded. Wait here. A brief silence followed, broken only by the sound of hammers and footsteps echoing through the construction sites nearby. Minutes later, a young boy, no older than 11, approached them, his expression calm but respectful. Come with me. Naruto-sama has granted permission to meet. Jiraiya scratched his head. Wait a minute. Didn't the gate guard say everyone here's equal? What's with this, Sama? The boy nodded firmly. Yes, that's true. But our respect for Naruto-sama comes from what he's done for us, not a title. Tsunade tilted her head. What did he do for you exactly? I was an orphan, the boy said quietly, walking ahead of them. My family was killed during a raid years ago. I survived, but I was living on scraps. Alone. A few months ago, Naruto-sama found me. He gave me food, a home, and, most importantly, purpose. He trained me himself. He does that for all of us. Neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade responded right away. As they walked, they took in the sights. Villagers working shoulder to shoulder, both shinobi and civilians building homes, planting crops, and helping one another without hierarchy. There were no clan banners, no jonin strutting about, just focused cooperation. Eventually, the boy led them to a simple two-story building. Wooden exterior, no guards, no grandeur. This is it? Tsunade asked, eyes narrowing. Yes, the boy replied. This is where Naruto-sama stays. It's nothing fancy. He says if we're all equal, he should live no differently than us. Jiraiya let out a low whistle. That kid really is something else. Tsunade remained quiet. Her heart beat faster as they approached the door. She could feel it, his chakra, calm, vast, and strangely gentle, and yet like a volcano. A village of equality, purpose, and strange discipline. A boy no one protected, who now protected others. A godson she had never met, about to open the door. As the door creaked open, the visitors were met with an unusual sight. 5 identical copies of Naruto, each busy with their own tasks. 2 clones were deep in discussion with a man who looked every bit the architect, surrounded by blueprints and scrolls. Another Naruto was sorting through financial documents, managing funds with an intensity that betrayed his focus. A 4th was reviewing old scrolls and organizing them by content, training, sealing, combat theory. And in the center of the room, the original Naruto sat calmly in a chair, arms folded, watching them with steady eyes. Without standing, Naruto spoke first, his tone cool and guarded. So what are you doing here? Or did your precious Hokage send you? Jiraiya shook his head, a faint smile trying to ease the tension. No, I came of my own accord. I wanted to meet you. Naruto didn't blink. So what do you want to know? Tsunade stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. What made you decide to build a village of your own? A faint, bitter smile crossed Naruto's face. Konoha, he said. That's what made me think of it. Tsunade looked confused. What does that mean? If you'd ever truly lived in the village, not from the Hokage's seat, but with its people, you'd understand, Naruto replied. To put it simply, it's rotten from the inside. Favoritism is everywhere. They preach teamwork and loyalty, say we should never abandon a mission or our comrades. But when the time comes, they do the opposite. His voice hardened. The council is the worst. Corrupt, power-hungry. They talk about what's best for the village, but all they want is control. Control to wage war, to use shinobi like tools. Tsunade's frown deepened. What are you talking about, Naruto? Who exactly are you blaming? Jiraiya's voice was quieter, more careful. Is it Danzo? But what does he have to do with any of this? Naruto nodded slowly. Yes, it's Danzo. Think about it. How did Orochimaru infiltrate Konoha during the Chunin exams? The village is surrounded by barrier seals. It wasn't just an oversight, it was treachery. Jiraiya's eyes sharpened. You're saying Danzo helped Orochimaru? He sided with him, Naruto said, his voice a mixture of disgust and certainty. He wanted the Hokage dead. With Hokage gone, Danzo believed he could seize power and become Hokage. Tsunade crossed her arms, her tone turning firm. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Naruto didn't respond with words. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a scroll, setting it on the table. As he unsealed it, its contents glowed faintly. He passed it to them without fanfare. As Tsunade and Jiraiya read through the documents, their faces grew more grim with each line. It was undeniable. Danzo had coordinated with Orochimaru. The details were chilling. Troop movements withheld, route orders left unexecuted, meeting logs buried in coded archives. Jiraiya finally spoke, voice strained. Where did you get this? Orochimaru's hidden base, Naruto replied. After I killed him, we raided every lab he had. Most of them were filled with inhuman experiments, but we also found this. He'd been planning this invasion for years. Danzo didn't just know, he helped. That's why Root didn't show up when the village was under attack. Jiraiya tried to protest, but Root was disbanded. Hiruzen gave that order himself. Naruto gave him a look that cut through the old man's defenses. You really believe Danzo would follow that order? A long silence followed before Jiraiya sighed. All right, it seems he didn't. There's more, Naruto continued. Orochimaru's research was focused on two things, awakening the Rinnegan and using Hashirama's cells. He experimented on dozens, maybe hundreds of test subjects. Only two were successful, Tenzo and Danzo. Both gained access to wood release. Tsunade looked stunned. Danzo had wood release? Naruto nodded. He did. Orochimaru tried to harness it for himself, but failed. He also pursued immortality, obsessively. But that dream's a waste. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Why do you say that? What good is immortality if you're alone? Naruto asked, his voice quieter now. Even someone like Orochimaru. He wasn't immune to loneliness. He leaned forward slightly, the tension in his frame barely contained. And then there's the cursed seal. He created a new version, stronger, more invasive. He planned to use it on Sasuke, take over his body. But Sasuke was more talented than he expected. He barely avoided being consumed by it. Tsunade asked the final question, her voice grave. And what did you do with all of this? I brought the jutsu here. We'll study and train with what's useful. Everything else, his research, his methods, the cursed seal, I burned it all to ash. Naruto's expression hardened, his voice low and controlled, but the rage underneath was unmistakable. And since we're being honest, he began, let me tell you what really made me leave the village and build my own. He glanced at them one by one, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, and when he continued, his tone was ice cold. You can blame it on my so-called family. To them, only Mito and Minma mattered. Why? Because they're Jinchuriki. Because they're special. He spat the word like poison. That fool of a father, Minato. hated me with vigor. And Minma? That brat always accused me of using some secret scrolls to train, like I was cheating just for trying to get stronger. And what did Minato do? He believed it. Every single time. Naruto leaned forward slightly, his voice thick with bitterness. Every time Minma cried or threw a tantrum, Minato would hit me. No questions asked. And the worst thing? He swapped my grades. Jiraiya's brow furrowed, uncertain. Swapped your grades? Naruto nodded slowly, the fury in his eyes contained but not dulled. I didn't get it at first. I trained harder than anyone, studied, pushed myself. But somehow, I kept barely passing. Later, I found out Minato switched my scores with Minma's, so that golden boy could shine, and I'd be the failure. After that, I stopped trying. I wrote my exams just well enough to scrape through. But Minato still beat me for getting low marks, while Minma, who failed everything, was coddled like a baby. Jiraiya remained quiet, clearly shaken. Tsunade opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, Jiraiya asked, "What about Mito and Kushina?" Naruto laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "They're just shadows, wrapped up in their perfect little world with Minma. Neither of them ever asked how I was doing. And here's something you probably don't know. We were on the same Jonin team." This startled all three. My Jonin sensei was Kushina, my own mother. But during training, she'd call Minma and Mito, take them somewhere to train privately, and leave me standing there like an outsider. Tsunade frowned. "Did you show up late to team meetings?" Naruto stared at her, incredulous. "Seriously?" "No. We all arrived on time. She just chose to take them. Never told me what to do. Never even looked at me." He leaned back, a sigh slipping from his lips. But I didn't bother asking. I was used to it. I trained on my own, just like I always had, before the academy, during it, and after. On one mission, she even abandoned the objective because her children weren't ready. That disgusted me. I snapped. I told her exactly what I thought, about how I was treated. And then, Tsunade asked, her voice quieter. She begged for forgiveness, said she wanted to make things right. But I didn't believe her, Naruto said flatly. Jiraiya frowned. Why? If she was feeling guilt and trying to fix things. Naruto cut him off. Let's say I hadn't snapped that day. Nothing would have changed. She'd still ignore me. Minma would still steal credit for what I did. Minato would still play dirty, like he always does. His voice grew darker. He would rob my promotion. Gave it to Minma. Said I lacked strategic thinking, even though I completed the mission perfectly. Minma nearly screwed it up, but guess who got the praise? Naruto shook his head. I snapped in front of Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke, and the mission clients. I did it there for a reason. Because if I had said anything behind closed doors, they would have denied everything. Pretended like nothing happened. Protected the image. The lie. He looked up, eyes sharp and unwavering. So tell me, why should I endure that? Why should I let them hold me back? Why should I let people who hate me decide my future? Silence followed. Heavy. Suffocating. Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune had no words. Because deep down, they knew there was no justification, no excuse, and Naruto's pain, long ignored, was finally laid bare. Jiraiya broke the silence first, rubbing the back of his neck with a tired hand. What he said about Minma, it's true, he admitted reluctantly. I never wanted to believe it, but now I'm not sure how he even passed the academy. His chakra control is a disaster, and he can't last 5 minutes in a proper fight without panting like he's run a mile. He glanced at Naruto, then back at the others. I trained him for a month before the Chunin exams. He improved slightly, but nothing close to what he needed. I thought he just needed more time. But now, I get it. Minato played dirty. He let out a deep sigh, the weight of it heavy. I don't know what went wrong. Minato wasn't like this. Back when we were young, when he was a Jonin, he was fair, kind. He didn't play favorites, not even during missions. Maybe the power got to him. Naruto didn't hesitate. His reply was calm, but cut like a blade. No, the power didn't change him. It just brought out his true self. Tsunade, who had remained quiet for a while, narrowed her eyes and shifted the topic, perhaps trying to ground herself in something more practical. Then tell me this. How did you get the money for all this? The land, the infrastructure, your people? Naruto smirked faintly. I own my own company. It operates across all the elemental nations. That surprised even Jiraiya. You own a company? Naruto nodded. Yes, Ryaman Industries. Maybe you've heard of it. Tsunade frowned. How did you build something that fast? In such a short time? Instead of answering directly, Naruto asked a question of his own. You remember Gato? Jiraiya's face darkened. Yeah, Gato was one of the wealthiest businessmen in the elemental nations. He had his hands in everything: shipping, smuggling, black markets, drugs, weapons, even human trafficking. A complete scumbag. Naruto's eyes hardened. He also controlled Wave Country, monopolized it through fear and bribery. We were sent on a mission there. Kakashi and Kushina didn't care about what Gato was doing behind the scenes. As long as the mission was complete, they turned a blind eye. He leaned forward. But I didn't. After we completed the mission, I went back. I hunted Gato down myself. I killed him, dismantled his network, seized everything he owned, and I rebuilt it under a new name. Ryaman Industries. Jiraiya blinked, stunned. You took over Gato's entire empire? I purified it, Naruto corrected. Turned it into a legitimate enterprise. I kept the shipping lines, the trade connections, and the infrastructure. But I tore down everything illegal, freed the people he exploited, erased his name, and built something better. That became the foundation of my village, and the economy that sustains it. Tsunade and Jiraiya exchanged a glance. Neither spoke. Naruto leaned back, a fire burning quietly in his eyes. I may not have had their support, or their guidance, but I had my own will, my own strength, and I swore I would never let anyone chain me down again. After spending a few days in Ryaman Village, observing everything Naruto had built, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizen finally prepared to leave. During their stay, they saw the village's stability, structure, and the quiet respect Naruto commanded from its people. As they stood by the village gates, ready to depart, Naruto crossed his arms and gave a dry, sarcastic smirk. So, are you going to run back and tell your precious Minato everything? Jiraiya shook his head. No, I'm not. Tsunade stepped forward, her expression firm but not unkind. I hope you know what you're doing, Naruto. Just don't go looking for trouble. Naruto nodded once. I'll be fine. Take care of yourselves. With that, the three turned and left, the gates of Ryaman closing behind them. A few weeks later, Konoha, Root Base. Beneath the surface of Konoha, in the cold, dim halls of Root headquarters, Danzo stood before a line of elite ANBU operatives, masked, silent, and ready to obey without question. Ryaman has grown too bold, Danzo said, his voice low and emotionless. Naruto must be brought under control. His influence is spreading, and that poses a threat to the balance of power. He paced slowly in front of the assembled unit. You 50 will strike the village. Destroy what he has built. Kill the weak. Make an example of them. But do not touch Naruto. He is mine to handle. The Root ANBU bowed in silent agreement. That night, the unit departed from the village, moving through forests and mountain paths with surgical precision. After several days of travel, they arrived near Ryaman's territory and set up camp in the surrounding woods, staying out of sight of patrols. They waited. They observed. And when they believed they had found a weakness, they made their move. The night of the raid. Darkness settled across the land like a thick blanket. Clouds smothered the moon, leaving the world nearly pitch black. The only light came from the distant glow of lanterns lining Ryaman Village's outer walls. The Root ANBU crept through the shadows, silent as ghosts. Their footsteps made no sound. Their chakra signatures were suppressed. They approached the gates, blades ready, prepared to breach and overwhelm the defenses in a swift, brutal strike. But as they neared the perimeter, the ground shimmered. Faint chakra lines, like spider webs across the soil, lit up with an eerie glow. Hidden seals activated one by one in a cascading ripple of light. A heartbeat later. Boom. Explosive tags hidden underfoot erupted in a chain reaction. Trees around the forest perimeter moved, literally moved, as chakra-infused roots burst from the ground, striking out like living sentries. Sensor alarms flared to life. Towers that had seemed abandoned now roared with light and energy. From the village walls, shinobi poured forth, disciplined, heavily armed, and fearless. At their head were elite unit leaders, each bearing the insignia of Ryaman, a spiral flame flanked by wings of steel. And above them all, standing atop a watchtower overlooking the battlefield, was Naruto. Dressed in sleek black armor with a deep crimson sash, he gazed down at the attackers, his expression calm and unreadable. Shadow clones flickered into existence around him, already moving to deploy defenses and intercept the intruders. Naruto had been expecting them. He had prepared for this. Konoha, Hokage's office. Minato sat at his desk, surrounded by scrolls and mission reports, going through the usual flood of Kage work. Ever since the invasion by Suna and Otogekyure, things had slowly begun to return to normal. The village's reconstruction was ongoing, and the people were finally starting to feel a sense of stability again. But for Minato, peace was still far off. His thoughts kept circling back to a far greater threat, the Akatsuki and their pursuit of the Biju. Although Naruto had defeated the One-Tails Jinchuriki and Three-Tails Jinchuriki, those Biju might reform. It might take years, decades even, but no one knew for sure. That uncertainty gave Minato some comfort, knowing Akatsuki's plans had been disrupted for now. Still, as both Hokage and the father of two Jinchuriki, he couldn't shake the lingering fear. His concern wasn't with Mito. She trained diligently, never complained, and carried the burden of being a Jinchuriki with quiet strength. No, his real worry was Menma. Minato sighed, guilt tightening in his chest. The mistakes he made during their childhood were now catching up to him, harsh and unavoidable. In his misguided attempts to protect Menma, he had tampered with the academy records, swapping his grades with Naruto's. He had wanted to build Menma's confidence, but instead, he had created a false image of success, built on lies. Worse, he had shunned Naruto in the process. Now, that decision was biting him back, hard. Jiraiya had recently trained Menma for a month leading up to the Chunin exams. Minato had hoped it would bring out his son's potential. Instead, Jiraiya handed him a report, blunt and painfully honest. He picked up the parchment again, reading over the familiar, scrawled handwriting. Lazy, a complete sloth, doesn't even try. Even after knowing the shadow clone training method, and still hasn't improved his chakra control, stamina, or endurance. Honestly, an 8-year-old would do better. All he does is whine about how hard training is. I hate to say it, but it'd be better if he dropped out of the shinobi program. If he had even a fraction of motivation, I wouldn't have to write this. But he doesn't. I don't know what you did, Minato, but he acts like being the Hokage's son makes him untouchable. Mito, on the other hand, she works, she fights, she pushes herself. Menma doesn't even have a drop of her drive. Minato closed the scroll, leaning back in his chair. The truth was there, spelled out clearly. Menma didn't just lack skill, he lacked the will to grow. And as his father, Minato had no one to blame but himself. His thoughts shifted now, away from Menma, away from the village, and toward his youngest son, Naruto. What he had done to Naruto. Sin was far too small a word. Some might call it a failure, others a tragedy. But to Minato, it felt like something darker, an abomination. A cruel and sickening injustice born not of malice, but of negligence and blind fear. His obsession with watching over the Jinchuriki, protecting them from succumbing to the Kyuubi's hatred, had made him turn a blind eye to Naruto. Worse, it had made him hate his own son without understanding why. And yet, that wasn't the true reason. Deep down, he knew it. Ever since that day, when Naruto had stood in front of him and asked that one question, Minato had been haunted by it. Why? He still had no answer. He couldn't understand what led him to treat Naruto the way he did. Was it fear? Was it guilt? Was it the pressure of the Hokage's mantle warping his judgment? And now, he saw the consequences. He had learned from Orochimaru, of all people, that Naruto wasn't just strong. He was a prodigy among prodigies. A genius that surpassed even Itachi Uchiha. That revelation alone had left Minato sick to his core, not out of envy, but out of shame. He had shunned that child, his own flesh and blood. He had allowed the village to despise Naruto, to isolate him, to see him as nothing more than the vessel of the Kyuubi, never once stopping it, never once stepping in. And yet, Naruto had risen, without him. Minato had heard the stories. How Naruto ended the civil war in Kirigakure single-handedly. How he defeated Yagura, the Three-Tails Jinchuriki. How he'd founded a village of his own. But what shocked him most, what terrified him in a way he couldn't explain, was how Naruto had trained 6 genin to Chunin level in just 3 months. What kind of training did he put them through? What kind of will did he forge in them? Minato leaned back in his chair, fingers gripping the edge of his desk as the weight of it all came crashing down. He had made a mistake, a devastating, irreversible mistake. And now he realized he may have lost his son forever. In village, a girl with crimson-red hair lay silently on her bed, eyes wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. The dim moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting pale shadows across the room. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks, soaking into the pillow beneath her head. "I'm sorry, lil bro. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling with sorrow. This was Mito, the second child of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Her thoughts were consumed by one name, Naruto, her younger brother. She remembered everything, how he was treated, how he was hunted by the very people he called villagers. She had seen it all. She had watched their father raise his hand against Naruto when Minma threw a tantrum, blaming Naruto with lies and manipulation. And still, she said nothing. She remembered how their mother turned a cold shoulder, how Minma mocked Naruto, bullied him, used cheap tricks just to make him look bad, just to make their father angry enough to strike him. And she, Mito, had stood in silence. Not because she hated Naruto, never because of that. She loved him. But she failed him. She failed to defend him. She failed to comfort him. She failed to stand beside him when the entire family turned their backs on him. Not once did she tell him he mattered. Not once did she try to shield him from the pain. Over the years, she watched him grow more distant, more withdrawn. And even then, she still didn't reach out. Now he was gone.